Coming up on Final Edition, Charlotte's favorite son returns home, and the latest on the never-ending arena issue. Thank you for joining us. I'm Joey Poppin for Jerry Hancock this week. Joining me to wrap up the week's topics, Sterling Benson-Weber from NBC6, Eric Spanberg from the Business Journal, Mike Koza, WBTV News, and Lauren Marco of the Charlotte Observer. It seems like we have a plate full of topics this week, never-ending arena issue, but is it a surprise? Billy Graham Ministries moving to Charlotte. Eric?
Well, it was a very well-kept secret. A lot of us knew about the land deal, and there were all these machinations going on. The chamber was trying to bring in someone big, but really it didn't leak, and they kept it under wraps, and they unleashed it this week. And it really is heaven sent. I mean, when you look at the economy right now, you have a $125 million organization that has anywhere from 450 to 600 jobs, depending on who you're talking to, and probably only 150 of those will come from Minneapolis, where the Billy Graham Ministries is currently headquartered. So that's a lot of local jobs. Very nice surge of good news for the Charlotte area.
Joey, just to fill in a little there, some time ago, the Charlotte Chamber went to the City Council and they said, we have a company that wants to come to Charlotte, wants to move its headquarters operation, wants to buy land through a real estate development company out along Billy Graham Parkway, city-owned land. But nobody would ever say who the company was. Well, the City Council this week agreed to sell that land at the appraised value, and then 3 days later we have the announcement that it is Billy Graham Ministries. And everybody is saying Billy Graham Ministries are coming home because, of course, Billy Graham is from the Charlotte area. I guess that this kind of gives new meaning to the term a clean industry.
Well, plus we beat out Louisville and Norfolk for the headquarters.
Exactly. Of course, his son Franklin lives in Boone, has his own ministries. Could this move be even more of an example or an indication that Franklin will take over? Is he not currently the president?
We talked to Franklin about that. He is the president of the ministries, but as he pointed out, Billy Graham is still the chairman and very much the CEO. But I think that Franklin Graham certainly played a part in this. Franklin, who runs several other ministries in North Carolina, wanted to bring it here, wanted to consolidate those ministries to some degree, and Billy Graham was amenable to it and enthusiastic about the idea, and they were all especially enthusiastic about coming to an address on Billy Graham Parkway.
Well, of course, Sterling Benson-Weber, your station is on Billy Graham Parkway,
exactly.
Off of it. What is it like knowing that you're going to have this Fortune 500 company just down the road from you?
Well, certainly it's very exciting, and of course they didn't have room to expand in Minneapolis, so this was just a natural fit. And so, of course, everybody's looking forward to this.
Any thoughts on this one? Lauren.
Well, it's a $43 million investment. That's certainly going to help. They're talking about a campus that could expand to many size, the size that they're planning right now. So it's not only jobs and investment, it's construction on the west side. And let's talk about that part of town for a while.
Absolutely.
It's right near the airport. They've suffered quite a bit. They're looking at the possibility that the Charlotte Coliseum won't have its major tenant, and they could use a boost, and they got one.
Yeah, this is right across Billy Graham Parkway along Tyvola at Billy Graham from the Coliseum, right across from the Coliseum. And in the long run, it's not just a company headquarters, it's also some other things. It's going to be the Billy Graham Archives, and it's going to be a museum on evangelism. That could end up being quite a tourist attraction.
I was going to say, could we see the current Coliseum work into this plan if, in fact, Charlotte gets a downtown Coliseum?
Well, that'd be interesting.
Something to think about, huh?
Segue or what?
The other thing, though, is there's been this talk uptown of late of a Billy Graham Park, on the land that the county bought recently from Wachovia. So you would have to think this helps their chances to get that done.
Okay. We did have a transition, so let's go right into it. What is the latest with this never-ending arena issue?
Well,
Lauren?
the latest is more in other cities than our city. Louisville is getting ready with its big proposal to the Hornets. Ray Wooldridge, the owner, says he wants to know where he's going by January 1st. Now, they've blown through many deadlines before, but they're getting more desperate by the day. They're still losing money in Charlotte. Then we've got Norfolk. Norfolk doesn't think it's the #1 choice. Ray Wooldridge has said that Louisville is his #1 choice right now, but Norfolk is continuing with its pitch, and it's not as strong as Louisville's, but it's nothing to sneeze at either. They're talking about the equivalent of some tax increment financing. They don't actually have that there, but it would be something similar to lure the Hornets to the Hampton Roads region. And then we've got Charlotte. What's happening here? Well, a recent survey of the council shows that when you ask, what are you willing to do to keep the team here by building a new arena, they say land and infrastructure. Now, there's some wiggle room in that. Some say land and infrastructure, period. And some say, well, maybe some money. But the general thought is, we are not competing, and that's a big change from last spring when it was what can we do. This time it's we're not bringing the subject up.
Oh, I disagree with we're not bringing the subject up. I think the Charlotte City Council has staked out an opening negotiating position. The opening position is land and infrastructure. If you talk to city council members and you say, what are you willing to do? They all say land and infrastructure. But if you probe by asking the right questions, you find more than a little wiggle room there. If you say, for instance, not just uptown land, but might that include land at the current Coliseum? A lot of land out there. It would add a lot of value, maybe $20 million or so to this deal. It would also eliminate the possibility of competition between a new arena and the city Coliseum. Well, then some city council members say, well, you know, I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to talk. And if you say, for instance, well, how about some kind of seat tax for the new arena to help pay for it, where the people who actually use it would help pay the bill. Well, then you find some people who say, well, you know, that maybe we could look at that. So I think this land and infrastructure only idea is truly the opening negotiating position of the city.
I don't
and
think there's a negotiating position.
They all say, and the mayor says very strongly, if there's someone out there in the private sector who has a proposal that they want to make, bring it forth and let us see it.
Now would be the time. Well,
now would be the time.
But the funny thing about all this is, for example, last week, Ray Wooldridge, makes this statement that Louisville's in the driver's seat, and gosh, this is going to be a great marriage. And the same day, a big group of local political leaders in Louisville announces, hey, we have no interest in this. This is not the right move for us. You've already got companies up there saying, well, I don't know if I'll buy a suite. I'll buy some tickets. So, they have the same boat in some of these other cities. So the funniest part is it's almost like Ray and George are standing out in the corner, it says, we'll dribble for food. I mean, these guys have nowhere to go, because if you stay with the premise that they're not going to sell the team, which is what they insist, then they have nowhere to go.
But when you talk about Charlotte's willingness to engage in this debate again, there was a little bit of talk from 1 or 2 council members, not more than that, right after the election. And everybody said, oh, they're rekindling this debate again. They want to talk about it again. If you ask council members individually, and Mike, this is, I think, another important question to ask them, are you willing to bring this matter before the board? The typical answer was John Tabor's. I ain't bringing it up. Another typical answer from Sarah Spencer. There's nothing on our plate. We have nothing to do. It's not on their agenda.
Yeah, but the point is, they want somebody from the private sector to bring it up. Nobody wants to initiate this discussion, but they're all willing to talk. The feeling is, if you talk to people in the business community who are close to this, that there is an effort out there to try to find some kind of mixed-use development that would go around the county park, that would involve city land and infrastructure and maybe some other things.
And we're still talking uptown.
But it would uptown.
Absolutely.
But it would be a private development, maybe a privately owned arena, but bring us something that we can react to. I think that's where the heart of the city council is.
Well, so Lauren, these council members, I had the impression, are they bringing it up because of losing the CIAA tournament and potential other college events that could come to Charlotte?
Well, for the few that are talking about it, their negotiating point would be, well, it's not for the Hornets because the Hornets are wildly unpopular. It's to bring tournaments like the CAA to Charlotte, which the CIAA, which we just lost to Raleigh,
or the ACC.
Right, or the ACC, and that's the arguing point. It's the safer arguing point because nobody wants to argue we want to build it to keep the Hornets because the Hornets are barely getting 9,000 people at a game now.
Well, the case they have to make is that it's privately developed. I mean, that would probably help their case tremendously. And the other case they have to make is whether we have the Hornets or not, we will have to build a new arena soon because it's outdated and we're starting to lose these types of events. I mean, that's the case you have to make if you want to try and get any kind of public goodwill out of this thing.
Yeah, you keep hearing this argument that we're not doing this for the owners of the Hornets, especially. This isn't for Shin and Wooldridge. Sooner or later, they will go. But there is a feeling that we want to keep an NBA team and that we want to have an arena that is competitive, and that's what people are going to say. Let me talk a little bit about Norfolk and Louisville. I don't think Norfolk has anywhere near the economic power necessary to support an NBA team. I think Louisville is a closer case. Louisville is finding out in the past week or so that the closer you get to a financing plan, the more opposition develops. In the abstract, it's easy to say, yeah, I'm for an arena, but now you're going to talk about how to pay for it. They're talking about, the mayor is putting together a plan for financing, and supposedly the rumor is that it's going to involve a bond issue. Now the county commission comes out in Louisville and says if there's a bond issue, it's going to have a referendum. The people are going to have to vote on it. Does that sound familiar? Have we heard that before? You also have people in Louisville saying, well, the mayor is putting this plan together in secret discussions behind closed doors. Hey, does that sound familiar? Have we heard that before?
So we're seeming to see some conflict
Yeah, it's the same kind of debate that went on in Charlotte, and there's also hold on, I got to look at my notes here. Oh, there's also the issue of whether or not it's a rush job. They're running against a deadline set artificially by the Hornets.
Sounds all
Some
too familiar.
people are saying why are we going to get this plan at the last minute? There's not going to be adequate discussion and examination. Does that sound familiar? It all sounds pretty familiar.
Sterling, hard to believe that all of this 10 years ago, we wouldn't even think about this talk coming up. And you've been here for that long.
But it's been very topical. But again, what I'm finding, though, there are some fans who simply are out of the loop now. They don't really care. They've kind of tuned it out. They're waiting for something to happen concrete. I know that there are people I know who've been very strong fans in the past, but they simply lost interest in this whole matter.
Will they regain the interest with perhaps new ownership? What is it going to take?
Well, that is some people's opinion, that new ownership would certainly refuel this whole debate locally. But again, that's something that's far-fetched at this juncture, so we'll just have to wait and see what happens.
Eric, what's your thoughts on that? Because
I think the Panthers are doing the most to help rekindle the interest in the Hornets. Because, the Panthers have lost 8 straight. So, no, I think it's clear that, this whole thing shows how young we are as a professional sports city because, in New York, people hate George Steinbrenner. They go see the Yankees and they have a great time. And in Dallas, people hate Jerry Jones. They go see the Cowboys. It's not a big deal. But here, we are still a fairly small and provincial town in many ways. And so we're all out of sorts because these are not the nicest guys, which is no surprise. But the crux of it is we've got to have new ownership. It's gone too far down the road. People are so angry at these guys, they will not support the team. So you got to have new ownership if you want to win the fans back. But you can if you get new ownership.
Well, that's an interesting issue. I don't think we're going to have new ownership because I don't think Shin and Wooldridge want to sell. I think the question is whether or not there's going to be a new commitment between the city and the team, and if there was that commitment to stay in Charlotte, then would the fans come back? The fans have come back a little bit since that first game where there was such a bad turnout.
9,000.
But we're not there yet. They clearly need more turnout.
A new commitment between the city and the team is a really hard thing to pull off when we've had a referendum that showed many people don't want to give money to the Hornets. And we've also had a real downturn in the economy, and it's very difficult to argue as a politician that we're going to take city money and we're going to invest it in this type of facility when money that could be going to sewers and garbage pickup may not be available the way it was in past years.
Let me just one thing that's interesting to contrast with our case is the Orlando Magic, similar size market, came in 1 year after the Hornets, play in an arena that's almost identical to ours. They've been asking for a new building. The taxpayers have said, look, we don't want any part of this. So the fight is on, right? After September 11th, the owner of the Orlando Magic comes out and says, you know what, this is not the time to talk about this. We're taking it off the table. Now, look at what happened here. A couple days after September 11th, where are Ray and George? They're on their separate planes, hightailing it up to Louisville to see what kind of deal they can get, and they're setting these deadlines of January 1. I mean, you know, they just keep shooting themselves over and over in the foot, and the public relations gaffes are really, it's a textbook. I mean, you know,
is there a
someone should
hidden
start a
giant
course.
out like what they think they have with KFC in Louisville? Is there a hidden giant here that could come to the plate?
Well, the
I think
Giants taking
it's-
an awfully long time to show up. Some people had hoped it was Michael Jordan, but that opportunity has passed. There is apparently a group, a locally dominated group that is willing to buy, but will not buy if either Ray or George are in the picture. And their price is apparently not the greatest price you can get for the team, but it's a price. If that happens, and the big obstacle is the current owners aren't willing to sell, but if that were to happen, you've still got an arena problem. You know, $200 million to buy the team, you've got another $200 million you've got to find to build the arena. It's really a $400 million problem.
Well, and let's not let the Charlotte business community off the hook here. I mean, as bad as Ray and George have been, I mean, you remember during the referendum, Johnny Harris told some people, that, hey, if you don't want this thing, just get out of town. That did not help. Hugh McCall, during the whole process, said, this is a slam dunk, we're going to make it work, we're going to have ownership changed before we get to the referendum. That didn't happen. And no one has really called any of these guys on it. Where is the vaunted Charlotte business community, the can-do city, the people who never give up? You know, they are meeting, they're trying to put something together, but so far it's not been a good effort.
I think Eric has asked a good question, and my guess is there's going to be a run at an arena without a change of ownership. I think we may see a consortium of business leaders trying to put some arena plan together as part of an overall mixed-use development uptown. You know, you were talking about Orlando, that Orlando has been so textbook in the way they handled this in a good way. But on the other hand, I've also heard it rumored that if we lose the Hornets, maybe we can steal the team down in Orlando.
That's right.
And if that should happen, would we go ahead and buy into this new arena if we had another team
Well,
come
you
in?
wouldn't get a
I don't
team
know.
without an arena, that's for sure.
It is a puzzle, and of course we're going to be talking about this for some time to come.
And
it's never ending, is it?
If a proposal comes to the city leaders ought to talk about it openly, and they ought to negotiate in public, and they ought to let the public buy into the process this time, not take it behind closed doors and behind a veil of secrecy, so that at the end, people are in on the landing, but they weren't in on the takeoff.
And
You heard it first here,
Yeah,
folks.
that's right. That'll happen when Shaquille O'Neal agrees to a pay cut.
Well, let's move on. School choice plan. Sterling?
Well, of course, they're ready to roll that out. Of course, the hotline opened last week, and the applications go home with students November 26th. And certainly you can start applying for the choice plan on December 1st at the Showcase of Schools, barring any last-minute legal maneuvers. You never know around here. Certainly last year they had to scrap the plan just a day before the Showcase of Schools. But the interesting thing is that we find in a recent survey that about 56% of parents say they don't know very much about the plan, or they know nothing about the plan. I think they've simply lost touch with it because of the fact that we've had so many different choice plans on the table, and they're kind of asking, which plan is it now? And so that's a public relations problem for the school district, and they've admitted that they really have to go out in earnest and try to make people familiar with this plan in a very short amount of time. Well, right now they're doing everything. They're having radio ads, they're having billboards, they're doing newspaper ads, the whole gamut. And they're also going out into the community and actually talking to small groups. They had a meeting just this week, two actually, to try to familiarize the public again with this plan. But it's very important that people know what they're buying into. I think people like the idea of choice, they just don't know what their options are. And so that's something that the school district really has to focus in on in a very short amount of time, because those applications are due January 18th. So people need to get on.
Another education issue that I want to touch on, it touches the region around Charlotte. The 3A football games postponed Friday night because of this lawsuit. counter lawsuit from East Lincoln High School. Can you just fill us in? This has never happened before, has it?
Well, it certainly hadn't to my knowledge, and it's gotten to be very confusing. But at last word, the North Carolina High School Athletic Association unanimously voted that they wanted to appeal a judge's ruling that North Gaston would be allowed to go to the playoffs and at the expense of East Lincoln. Right now, this whole matter is being debated again as the appeal unfolds, and so we'll have to wait a week to see that playoff.
And as a
actually begin.
result, towns and schools like
Right.
Mooresville, Concord, A.L. Brown out of Kannapolis, they're having to wait a week to play.
Well,
Exactly.
it's one thing where kids go to school. Okay, that's one matter. But when football games get delayed, now we're talking serious stuff. I mean, now we got to get in the courts and we got to get down and dirty with this stuff.
Hey, if we play the World Series in November, we could play football in December. What do you think?
Exactly.
I agree.
Let's move to public housing and the Hope Grant 6.
The Hope
Charlotte didn't
6
get.
grants. We didn't get it. We always get it. This was a surprise. Most people who deal in affordable housing down here thought we were going to get it. What's Hope 6? Hope 6 is the largest pot of federal money available to remake these old barrack-style, horrible housing projects of in our case, going 60 years back with Piedmont Courts, which sits on the edge of the Belmont neighborhood. And this was our fourth Hope 6 grant we applied for, and the first one we didn't get. It was a real shock. The news came from Washington, and they have not explained why. They won't explain why publicly. We missed out this time. They will sit down with the Housing Authority, if the Charlotte Housing Authority decides, and say, here are the reasons. Competition was a little bit stiffer this year. The program is about to sunset, but it should be renewed. So Charlotte has another chance next year, and Harrison Shannon, who's president of the authority, said we will indeed try again.
Eric?
Well, I mean, I think we had racked up something like $100 million worth of these Hope 6 grants since 1993 or so. The funny thing is, Harrison Shannon, embattled seems to go with his name like Slugger goes next to Mark McGuire's. I mean, obviously they'd had a very good track record, but this is just another shot, body blow to this project. And Piedmont Courts has been well documented by a number of media outlets in this town. I mean, it's just an awful, terrible place that needs to be renovated, revamped. The living conditions are, Afghanistan-like, I guess, would be the best reference at this time in the news. But, it is a real blow.
And Mike, I can remember years ago when we worked together, Piedmont Courts, that was the gym because they had just renovated. So we're back
Well,
needing more help.
times have changed, and
Yes, they have.
things run down over time, and this is an example of that. I think the interesting question is whether or not the allegations of mismanagement and bad training and financial tracking problems and bookkeeping issues at the Housing Authority, which was alleged in a report that was done by a management consultant for the Housing Authority, whether or not that has anything to do now with causing us to lose federal grants. We don't know the answer to that.
I'd like to argue that it doesn't for this reason. That particular audit wasn't part of the package that went up. It was an unofficial one. The official audits, the financial ones required by HUD every year, those are the ones that go up to Washington, and those have been clean for the past few years. This operational audit, which did not show good news at all, was not something that Washington considered officially in its program. I would also argue that Washington and its representatives in North Carolina have tried as hard as they can to support Harrison Shannon, embattled as he is. They are on his side. If anything, I think Washington wanted a win for Shannon, if only to help the man.
Well, Joey, I think the real shock is that there's a building that's 60 years old in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Exactly.
We knocked them all down.
While we're talking about housing, what's the latest on the Uptown Village?
Not particularly good news. This is the Hal Marshall Center land. It's on North Tryon between 9th and 11th. And the idea, very bold, to create this urban village with residents and street-level retail and maybe put the Mint Museum or another museum in there. And now, just like every other project, it's running into some tough times and the financing may not be there. Now the city, instead of talking about when it's going to happen, raised the if word.
Anybody remember a company called Elcor and the old convention center? I mean, these two projects have been along a similar dead-end track. And it's a real blow to Uptown because, you know, those are sort of the cornerstones that people have laid out. Okay, if we can get this and this piece with the trolley, we can really make something go here. And, of course, an arena, because we always have to talk about an arena in every conversation. So, you know, when you look at that project stalling and the economy the way it is, it's going to be hard to find developers and tenants.
Joey, some people would argue that this kind of problem occurs when you try to foster in a community economic development that is not supported by the free market. This is city and county owned land we're talking about here, and the city and the county are trying to negotiate a deal with a developer or developers to make something happen that would not otherwise happen. They're trying to channel it in a direction they want it to go, rather than putting the land up for sale and selling it and let the free market determine
Mike,
where
I'd
it'll
have
go.
to strongly disagree with you because I think if you look at downtown development in Baltimore and Cleveland, all these cities that we bring up, it's public money that goes into it. I mean, and so the real decision is, as a city, we have to decide, okay, if we want an energized downtown, are we willing to spend for it? Because it does not happen naturally in any city. You've got to put some public money in there to make it happen. Otherwise, everyone will go to the suburbs. And if that's what we want, that's fine, but we have to make that decision, and that's what all these arguments come down to.
Well, folks, that's it. We're out of time. Boy, 30 minutes really do fly by, do they not? Sterling Benson Weber from NBC6, thanks for being with us today. Eric Spanberg from the Business Journal. Mike Koza, WBTV News. And Lauren Marco from the Charlotte Observer. Thank you so much for being here as well. If you'd like to write to us, you can. There's the address on your screen, 3242 Commonwealth Avenue, Charlotte, 28205, or you can call 704-372-2442. I'm Joey Pop once again in for Jerry Hancock. Have a great weekend.
Hello, everyone. WTVI is your public television station. For more than 35 years, we've brought you informative documentaries, exciting new discoveries, in-depth coverage of national and local issues, and provided an encouraging and educational environment for your kids. We want to continue these fine services, but we need your support. November the 30th begins our pledge drive. Please tune in to pledge your support. Television just wouldn't be the same without WTVI, and WTVI wouldn't be the same without you.